Here at Ubisoft, the first game I worked on was Far Cry 2. I was the art director on that project. Worked with a fantastic team of veteran game developers, and it's a project that took almost 4 years to completion. Afterwards, I started evolving more and more towards the game design side of things. And after a few projects, like a new IP that sort of we didn't decide to pursue, and like a couple of other cooperations on other projects, I eventually got offered the position, like the possibility to come on board the Assassin's franchise. And being a longtime fan of the franchise, I mean, this was an opportunity that I could not sort of pass over. And so this is pretty much how I ended up on Revelations. I was always sort of a peculiar art director in the sense that my approach was always very systemic. For example, I worked a lot on Far Cry 2 on actually defining the graphical pipeline. So, like we had a really big challenge. We needed to create this, like visually, top tier game in this open world without any loading. To be able to achieve this, sort of I went down to the drawing board and actually redesigned a graphical pipeline from the ground up. Then in terms of actual art direction into the game, like instead of dealing with each scene as if it was a set piece, I focused more on approaching it like a system. So instead of having an artist place trees on the map, why not research how a jungle is structured and then creating formulas that will allow one simple brushstroke to populate an area with something that looks like a credible jungle right off the bat. The weather system, how the weather pattern works. It's actually plugged into gameplay where, depending on your playstyle and what's happening, the weather is actually altering. So from the get-go, I was always very much focused on systems and on, trying to plug everything into the gameplay, because I believe that creating a static image is akin to film. What we need to be doing is creating an image that evolves, that moves, and that alters in accordance to the player experience. So everything, I think that, from art to low-level design to mid-level to high-level storyline, everything should be one. And the closer you are to that, the more your game will be powerful. Assassin's Creed to me is a combination of a lot of different things that I completely love. Like first of all, it has a historical element, so it allows us to explore different areas, different interesting areas across the planet, different historical characters. It also has a science fiction element, but it's not so much sci-fi that it is sort of scientific extrapolation. So it's in the lines of the plausible. We never have anything magical. Everything has to sort of be explainable by technology. Like a famous quote says that any sufficiently evolved technology resembles magic to any inferior culture that is sort of sort of watching it. So that's sort of the rule that we have in Assassin's Creed, right? So everything is based on reality. Plus, it deals with like really interesting stuff like conspiracies, like age-old conspiracies. These two groups that have been, fighting like since the dawn of time. A precursor civilization that might have existed on the planet, like this advanced knowledge that was somehow lost. All of that stuff is super interesting to me. When you start with conception, my role is basically to establish, to establish an outline, a project blueprint, if you will. So we start with a very small team. I draft up a sort of a feature list. It gets approved. This is what we're sort of proposing for this opus. And then we draft up an outline of the story. Once we have that, we go into sort of brainstorming sessions, and we outline the whole game, like mission by mission, from beginning to end. We review it. Once we're satisfied with it, we can actually start with pre-production. So in the first phase, my job is mostly like establishing an outline, making sure that all the directors, all the owners of the different teams, different studios understand what our scope is, where we're going, what the meaning of the game is. So it's a lot of presentations, developing a presentation, developing a project outline, and then communicating that to make sure that everybody is on the same page. They know what the plan is. The Montreal studio is a huge studio with close to 2,000 people, I think. Not all working on Assassin's Creed, but we have quite a large brand chunk. And we also have other studios across the globe that also cooperate in these productions. Like different segments and different systems in the game are actually developed by different satellite studios. You know, we have Quebec City that does some of the elements. We have Singapore that does others, Annecy in France. We have Bucharest. We have Massive in Sweden. So it's actually a global effort, and to coordinate this is actually very challenging, but we've done it like for AC2, for ACB, and now for Revelation. So, you know, we're sort of used to this cycle. When we move to pre-production, it's essentially, my role becomes essentially making sure that like every team is starting on the right track, reviewing a lot, making sure that what was on paper is actually taking shape and looking like that in the actual engine. And then again, a lot of communication with all the studios, making sure that everything, reviewing a lot. And then when production comes along, my role becomes more one of communication, external, people like you guys, where I need to communicate on the game to like the press. All the while, still reviewing the end product and making sure that we're actually reaching the appropriate level of quality with all the execution, all the teams. Obviously, you know, Singapore is on a different time zone than we are, so it's a lot of early or late meetings. It's a lot of making sure, like, then there's, you know, the culture clashes, right? Like, you know, North Americans, we have a different way of communicating than, you know, Europeans or Asians. So it's, you know, trying to get all of those people with all of these different languages, all of these different ways of interpreting things and thinking to work towards the same goal and to keep their eye on the ball, and then to deliver, making sure that everybody's delivering the appropriate amount of quality. Like, as you know, like on Assassin's Creed, we really pride ourselves in in delivering like high quality games. You know, we aim for 90+ every time. And we take that very seriously. So reviewing and quality control is something that is super important for us here. The production itself takes about a year, but keep in mind that, like, you know, we've planned it in advance, and plus it's not like you know, 100 people crunching for a year. It's a huge team across many studios that all have their predetermined sort of like areas of expertise, and then we fit everything together as time goes by. But it's always a challenge.